Good morning, everyone. Welcome to How Change Happens, Purpose, Principles, and Responsibility in the Energy Justice Movements. I'm Amani Sawari. I'm an energy strategist with We Want Green Too, and I also manage communications for SEEN, the Community Energy Engagement Network. SEEN was established in order to empower frontline community organizations and advocates in the Midwest to influence state utility decision making to better serve them. We have three strategic focuses. One is regional networking and collaboration. The second is resource access. And the third is conference presence and participation. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today for this important discussion. During this webinar, we're going to be speaking with Briana Parker. She's the founder of Strategic Coyote, which is a firm that focuses on legal advocacy. It's dedicated towards shaping growth strategy, facilitation, and learning program design. So she's going to be talking to us specifically about how to include community, organizational, and system level settings in our change making process for these energy movements. And we're really excited to have her. Thank you so much, Ms. Parker, for joining us. And I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Amani. It's so great to be here to talk about how change happens because change is such um, a long process, and it's also you can have whole lifetimes of change. This is one of two sessions. So next slide, please. Okay. So a review of today. So we'll ground. We'll talk about who's in the room. Yes, feel free to put questions in the chat throughout. We'll talk about why we are here, and then we'll look at some examples, and then we'll ground ourselves to end the day in mechanisms of change. Kicking it back to you, Amani, for the introductions.
Yes. So
Next slide. It's like two slides after this.
So again, I'm Amani Sawari and I manage communications here at Scene. We also have Tanya Paslowski. I'll let her introduce herself. She's the founder.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Tanya Paslowski with SEEN. As noted, I also work with Elevated Engagement, helping consult on energy justice issues. And I will pass it. Brianna, I guess you introduce yourself and maybe we'll just open it up if anyone else would like to introduce themselves without any requirement, maybe to do so.
We also have a icebreaker question. So you can type into the chat one word for the change you want to see in energy in your work and community.
Oh, I have a word, and that word is consistency.
I'll jump in. When I think of change, what I would most like to see is just the priorities for community organizations to be at the forefront of the discussions that we have about energy issues.
One word that comes to mind for me is momentum. Go on, Sharon.
Hi, this is Sharon. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get on my computer rather than my phone, so I can't get my chat box up. But um, I I'm just sort of here because I started following We Want Green too many years ago, and I just got on their email list again. So I saw this webinar, so I thought I'd come. Now I'm in North Carolina. So I don't know how much I'm going to contribute, but I'm glad to be here to listen.
Thank you. And thank you, Amani, for opening this up. And thank you for just grounding us in the background. The
It's
work
kind of
that,
hard to hear you, Brianna.
oh,
I
okay.
don't mind speaking up. Thank you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. So
Yes.
I just was saying, thank you, Amani, for that background on seeing the organization. Because I wanted to take a moment to just ground in that. Seeing works to shift who has power and energy decision making. And we're all here working, whether you are wherever you are in the country, you're working on a just energy transition, which requires community leadership, self-determination, and the repair of historical harm. I will reiterate all throughout this presentation that real change happens together with people. It's relational. Change is relational. Uh, People have power, even though sometimes in the things that are happening in energy today, you might feel powerless. So next slide, please. Okay. So I'm sure that we've all had experience in community work and have experienced change in an advocacy setting. So as we get into some case examples before we go there, I invite everyone to take a moment to quietly think about a time when something shifted in your community. It could have been for the good, for the bad. I mean, relatively perspective is all included in that. So how about we take a moment and just ground in a, a situation. Take a breath and think about what happened. What was that experience? How did you feel in your body with the experience? Think about what made that change possible. So, a couple of questions just to ask yourself. Who showed up? And then when you encounter change, there are risks involved on both sides, but most of the time it's more risks involved on the community side. So, what risks were taken? What relationships were involved? So, if you want to share a word, please share it in the chat. I just want to hold that real change is rarely simple, neat. This is what we're doing, and then it ends in that result. There are lots of paths along the way for real change to happen. Next slide, please. So again, what is change? So when people think about change, they think about policy. That I'm going to change this policy, and that's going to be a win for us, and change is going to happen. Or I'm going to attend this meeting. I'm finally showing up at this table. And so, because of my influence, change is going to happen. So, change is not any of those things, it's all of those things and more. Change is structural. So, when we say structural, we mean actual shifts. So, there's power involved, there's sometimes money involved, and sometimes there are rules involved in that change and those structural changes. But the core that, again, I will talk about throughout this process and conversation today is change is relational. It's trust. Trust deepens across different community bonds, and that causes strength to happen. So change is very relational. It's the relationships that you have with decision makers. It's not only the relationships that you have with decision makers, it's relationships that you have with community. And then lastly, change is sustained. People change over time. You have one decision maker that could be friendly to the community, and then another decision maker comes in and does not understand those same things. So it's very sustained and it's beyond funding. and it's consistent community power. Later on, we'll talk about how working intergenerational working together makes sense and how it helps sustain change. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to ask for some assistance from you guys because I have some case studies that I want to go over, but I'm sure that there are case studies in your community that you like to share or just a situation. So please, if you hear something, be open to sharing. Next slide. So let's get into the first case study. So the West Virginia story. So in West Virginia, there was a problem that the community came together to solve. So here's the problem. In Virginia, communities were asked to pay higher energy bills to cover the cost of a coal plant closures, a transition they did not design nor could they afford. Right? So they're in West Virginia, and their bills are getting higher and higher. In the community, the jobs are gone. So I'm just painting a picture because there's always a story. There's multiple stories always happening at once. They're not making more money, but their energy bills are going up. So then something happened. The community just didn't stand there and allow their bills to go up. They organized. So it wasn't just one sector of the community, it was many sectors of community, people that knew each other, that talked about the issue. So local churches, former miners, environmental groups, people that were everyday folks, they came together and they organized around our bill is going up and we can't afford it. So these residents, they showed up at PSC commission hearings and they told stories of, hey, this is causing an economic strain on my family. Hey, I can't, I'm choosing between paying this bill that I need because I need this home to be comfortable and my medicine or my food. They talked about their real life stories of the trade-offs that they had to endure because of the bills going up. And they also discussed the health impacts. It was a very powerful moment for for the commission and also for the community to just unite around their shared experience. So the result, there was a compromise transition plan that included bill assistance, renewable investment, and programs that would help the individuals in the community afford their energy bills. Organized community presence helped change this outcome from having a problem to we're not just going to sit there, we're going to engage in the process to ensure that the solution is going to make sense for the community because we live here. That's the West Virginia example. There's another example. Next slide. We'll just keep going. We'll ask this question later. I want to get to the Chicago example. So in Chicago, similar situation, similar issue, right? So in Chicago, it wasn't just the bills, it was the pollution. It was the pollution in the community. It was because these issues are it's not just one issue, it's more. There are health issues that come with communities in this just energy transition. So, communities across the south and west side of Chicago, they built a coalition across the city and their geographic locations, and they organized their Illinois Commerce Commission, and they had over 200 residents testify either by form or come in person to the commission hearing. And there was policy shift. There was change. The pollution was something that, if you're at the, you have to have evidence, right? The Chicago example, this environmental justice story shows us the example of communities, one, telling their story using qualitative evidence and research. Hey, I had this personal lived experience. Lived experiences matter. But not only that, data, the numbers. People love the numbers. So from the Chicago story, what we understand is that qualitative and quantitative data matters. Next slide, please. So I'll stop there and just open up the space and see if there are specific stories that you guys want to share. I mean, I can share another story. It's not about the energy transition, but it's a story in Detroit of a local community groups working together around water, which having people it was around water affordability specifically and the major shutoffs in the city of Detroit and community data going and having community tell their stories as a means to show that hey, this is actually happening, here are the stories. Just a powerful example of how change happens, but it does not stop there. It's a continuous storytelling process. It's a continuous process of monitoring and working with decision makers to understand what's going on to get information to communities. But I'll stop there and pause to see if anybody would like to share a story of how change happens in this realm of a just transition. It could be anywhere in the country too.
I'll share an experience from We Want Green too. So we regularly participate in the Michigan Public Service Commission, so similar to West Virginia's PSC or Indiana's commission. Um, that regulatory body, we regularly participate in the legal proceedings when rate hikes are introduced. And as a part of one of the proceedings that happened, this was in 2021 or 2022. In addition to bringing storytellers from the community who talked about how outages had consequences on the food in their fridges. And there was one grandmother whose daughter lost milk that she was pumping that she couldn't replace for her newborn baby. We also did a survey calculating the energy burden in 48214. And having those stories in combination with the data, as you said, resulted in the organization getting a settlement that allowed us to do free weatherization and retrofit home repairs across the east side of Detroit. And so we're currently in the process of doing those repairs and working with residents, a lot of elderly residents and folks with young children, which not only includes weatherization, but also lead remediation as well. And this is all at no cost to the homeowner. And this is because folks decided to tell those stories and provide that data as well, which required community trust, as you mentioned too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for uplifting that change work that you guys did. It's long. It's long work. You said 2021. It's 2026 now, and you guys are still working on it because change, it takes time. It takes time. Thank you for sharing. Would anybody else like to share? You know, I would like, oh, Sharon.
I can't really talk about this in detail, but I am involved in a group that is community organization called Justice United in my county. And recently, they have all the property in the county has been assessed, and it's clear that developers are getting big cuts in their property assessment, property taxes, and targeted neighborhoods that are historically African American properties are being assessed at this astronomical rate that is clearly unfair. So this organization, yeah, last week had a meeting with all of the candidates who are willing to attend, who are running for county commissioner. And there were lots of testimonies from people who are burdened by this increased tax. And it was very powerful. And these candidates were asked to make a pledge about what they would do. Now, some said no, they couldn't pledge a dollar amount, but most of them did pledge to do what they could do on the commission. And also, this is a group that's going to come back. They're not just one-time protest and then that's it. This community organization will hold their feet to the fire, and they're training people on how to appeal tax assessments. So they've saved already thousands and thousands of dollars for people.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. There's so many gems in that story around just the learning process, the standing up for each other process. Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that. Tanya?
I was going to ask Brianna about the that training component of how to, if you have recommendations on how to initiate the focus area and then the getting the word out to people in the community to highlight the right information in that process of just understanding experiences before you're taking it into the policy realm or into the specific advocacy realm, that process of building the coalitions or building the foundation to do that work. And I know we talked about building trust previously. I don't know if you have anything else, maybe just to add to that component of the early work to be prepared for folks to advocate for themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I would say it's not coming up in a specific way in later in this presentation. So thank you for bringing that question. Um, there's this idea of trusted messenger, but before I get to trusted messenger, I've been in the realm of a practitioner and change work. And I've also been a community member, but I've always stood in the way of a practitioner. So I have a social work background. And so if we seeing like trends happening in a community, I think about affordable housing. It's a really big issue. Like how do you ensure that housing is affordable? And so there's trusted community messengers that already exist in communities. So we understand, like Amani, you just talked about We Want Green too, which has been a community-based organization in the city on the east side of Detroit for a very long time. And so they're trusted. I'm gonna go to We Want Green too because I'm trying to figure out this process, or I have a church in the community that I go to, and I get to see people at the church, and we're sharing similar issues. So there's spaces that already exist that happen organically. These spaces are where people tend to bring information in. So if I'm going to Central United Methodist Church in Detroit, I'm going to say, "Hey, I'm at Sunday school and I'm talking about my energy bill, or I'm at a community event and I'm talking about my energy bill, or I'm talking about the lack of affordable housing." So there are already organic places that people are having conversations at, right? They're already having these conversations. And so the use of organizers is a part of change work, where organizers and practitioners are intentionally in these spaces. They're hearing the emergent things that are coming up, and then they're bringing people together. They're creating these coalitions. So this church may not talk to this community group, but they have people that use both of them that are having a similar issues. So then they get together and they start talking. There might be community meetings that are organized just so people can share their stories with each other first. There's food always. You can't have a good event without food. I'm not showing up. I don't know about y'all, but I won't show up to an event without, at least some coffee, a little bit of snacks. You're feeding people. There are organic conversations that are just happening because these are real issues and it's real people. And so that is how change starts to happen. And then you have targets and tactics, which we'll get into. But did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's great. Appreciate that.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Next slide, please. All right, the mechanics of change. Um, okay. So I keep going back to this. Change is a long process. It's not, I mean, we've been talking about affordable housing for a very, very long time. And since I can remember, or people being pushed out, or the repair historical harm. And the reason why we talk about repairing historical harm is because systemic issues are still happening today where people can't afford things because of where they live, because of their demographic, where they live. It's all connected, right? So there's care. And Tanya, I thank you for your question because I think you alluded to this, that there is community care and support. So when these issues come up, like, hey, I can't afford my energy bill, there is there's transformation that happens because community already they already exist and they already exist with care. The start is not the issue, it's the care. It's relational work. And relationships take time. It takes time because you have to trust, and it takes time to get to know each other, and it takes time to build a shared vision. And sometimes there's tension that is opportunity, right? Like when you have tension in community, that takes an even longer time to get over the tension. But sometimes that tension also helps to build longer trust. And I would like to say this again. It's not just about policy change. The change happens when communities decide to get together to to work on an issue. That's where the change happens. Next slide. Okay. Before I go into this, it's called the long arc of transformation. I wanted to take a step back and just take a temperature check about how long change takes and the relational work involved in it, just with you guys. And the question is to you is, can you remember a time, like how long have you been working on a specific issue for it to change? And has that issue changed yet? This is just a temperature check. Just because I threw something at you guys. I said change takes a long time. So how do you be patient in change? And it starts with community. But have you guys experienced something changing very quickly? This is a temperature check. It's just a hypothesis. Just a hard word to say.
In my experience, the only things that change quickly are like things that we might have complete control over in our own very intimate environment, like within our household or something, which is still a system and a structure. But when it comes to larger institutions, just thinking about my background in criminal justice, for example, um, people in prison were advocating for voting rights, especially for people on parole and probation. And that advocacy work started in 2016-ish with people organizing and creating coalitions. But people didn't get their right to vote for in California, for example, for another 4 years. It took deciding a ballot measure, collecting signatures, putting it on the ballot, and then finally getting folks that voting right. And then it's still trickling down in other states. It recently happened in New Jersey, all within like the early 2020s. It's still happening in a lot of states, and there's still even more states that aren't even considering it. And so that's over a decade of work right there, just to this point.
Thank you for sharing.
I'll add just Brianna and thinking about the contrast of what short-term change looks like compared to long-term change. I know we've had here with our local, I live in the Lansing area in Michigan, and we've had some instances where the local city council may have, for instance, been prepared to make a decision that would result in change. There's been a lot of activity around how to support those who are unhoused locally. And so our city council has been prepared to make some decisions and things like, for instance, cleaning out some of the encampments, or I should say, destroying some of the encampments where folks live. But that as the community showed up in those meetings to fight back against some of those steps that we were able to get, or the community was able to achieve a short-term victory in that that decision was not made in that particular meeting. Um, but I know as you're talking about here, the longer term change requires that longer term investment. So those that felt like a success in those moments where you have the short-term change, but you recognize that sometimes those just push out that same issue for another couple weeks or even another couple months, but doesn't result in the type of permanent change that we're talking about today.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you both. To add, I would add that that's like having short-term change is, it can happen fast. Is it sustainable? Because I've seen change happen and there's short wins, but you have to continue to track it. You know, Amani, you talked about prison reform and just the changes that have happened over time. I can think of reproductive rights that have changed over time and being back at a specific point. But the information and the stories, the one thing, the point of this is to say change takes time, continuum, right? It's a continuum. But those stories, like the storytelling that's involved in change, it never stops. It continues over decades. It continues. The stories are constant. And I should have started with this, but I didn't. But I think it's important to bring up. So this morning, Jesse Jackson passed away. And Jesse Jackson worked for Change for a very, very long time. And one of the things that Jesse Jackson really worked on was the automotive industry and having minorities have opportunities in the industry. And he did a scorecard every year around um, he did a scorecard every year around this time of the year. There's the auto show in Detroit and Chicago. So he would show up in both places and give scorecards to the automotive companies about how they're doing on diversity. And we also see that in the energy space. We see that in a lot of spaces. And as we can see right now, that work happened over his lifetime. And now in 2026, that work it's regressing and it's going up and it's going down, it's going up and it's going down. And that is why change takes a long time because you might tell the story um 50 years right ago and that story has changed, but the characters are different, the people are different, and some of the same things can still be going on. That's staying on it, staying consistent, ongoing engagements. I'll stop there, Sharon. I see you. Just wanted to note that. Next slide, please. So, relationships as a foundation of change. So, relationships are important to change because those relationships, just like I gave the example of Jesse Jackson and his work for economic justice for minority communities, that work involves coalitions. It involves teaching community, teaching the younger generation. We talked about intergenerational conversations. So it's not enough for you to do the work in 2026 and be, having a body of knowledge. One day the work is still going to need to be done, and you're going to need to be able to transition the information that you've learned. But it starts with authentic connection, relationships, having a relationship with somebody, and whether it's somebody that's different from you too, right? Like it's not always people that look like you that will help make the change happen. It's a diverse coalition. And then also want to note is that change is something that happens where I talked about intergenerational communication. It's the back and forth. It's I have 20 years of experience in energy and you have 5. But somebody that has 20 years of experience being able to learn from someone with 5 years of experience. Us being able to learn from different communities, whether this is happening in West Virginia versus this is happening in North Carolina versus this is happening in Michigan. They're all happening different places in their similar situations, but being able to learn and also teach. So change is something, it's not just in your community because there's shared experiences over communities. And then bringing it back to energy, energy advocacy means connecting voices with policymakers, scientists, activists, and having networks that have shared purposes, like the Scene Network, going and creating opportunities for those stories to be told, just like that West Virginia case, just like that Chicago case, just like some of the cases that you guys have brought up. Next slide. Okay. I want to pause there and just ask, has anything that I've said around intergenerational change making happening and the need for teaching and learning? And the question is, have you guys experienced that? Because I can say for myself and working in this space, I've learned from people who have more years of experience. And I've also learned from people who are new with fresh eyes that have just got into the movement of changing energy regulatory spaces or are working in this space and are coming up with very innovative ideas. So I just wanted to pause for that to see how is the teaching and learning process for you guys.
Hey, for what it's worth, Brianna, I think a lot of what you've captured on this slide is the inspiration for seeing the community energy engagement network around the Public Utility Commission spaces. But I think these are the types of drivers that our board has really set forward for us in
Mhm.
thinking about the work that we do and that we are creating, again, through the direction from our board members, that centering marginalized voices and making sure that we are saying the things that need to be said and not shying away from addressing some of the inherent, you reference dominant narratives there, some of the dominant narratives that exist in the energy industry that maintain a status quo that does not work for folks who are, for whom utility and water services are the most challenging. So I just want to uplift the way that our board has provided direction on our work is well aligned with this and the sense of responsibility that comes with taking on this type of transformation, that we all take on a certain responsibility to push past some of those dominant narratives and, as you note there, imagine new possibilities.
Thank you.
I don't have the experience that you all have in organizations, but just in general, when a new a new person, maybe a younger person or person that isn't like the dominant group, um, it brings when they ask questions like, why are you doing this? It's a way of assessing what you're doing. Like, why are we doing that? Because we've always done it that way. Or is there a new way? Or does it help us to evaluate that? That I've grown to appreciate rather than thinking, oh no, this new person, we're gonna have to explain everything again to them. So that just came to my mind.
Thank you. You know, for me, I've been in spaces where it has not always been, hey, let's welcome these new voices in. But I've been quickly humbled by the experience saying, this is, like you said, Sharon, this is how things are. This is how we do it. And just being knocked on my head and saying, like, I don't want to, like, change. Like, change is allowing myself to learn, for others to teach me something new. And that's a very humbling experience because when it's your issue, it takes a long time, one. And then two, as you're in the longevity of working on an issue, you feel like you are expert in that issue. But that teaching and learning the point that I'm making is the teaching and learning process is always happening, and being open to that allows for change to happen. So there's this power of critical consciousness, and that allows us to question the things that are happening again and again so that we can reimagine them. So we understand that the energy process is this to talk to regulators. So if we had fresh energy coming in and somebody said, "Well, have we ever tried this?" and we don't try it, we're losing on the power of critical collective consciousness. So allowing new ideas to come in is a very humbling process, and it's a place in the change making process where you have to check yourself. And I just wanted to be honest with you all today and say, I'm not always there. I'm not always in that process, but it is a part of the process to allow those new ideas to come in, to develop something new, because this work is very long term and it allows us to envision alternatives to change these systems, because that's the work that we're doing. We're changing systems. And then creating spaces for transformation. So Tanya, you uplifted these areas, and I'll just touch on them very briefly. um to be in a new space and speak and not understand what has happened before takes collective action and collective community action. And so one of the things that this organization does is go into spaces where there are regulators that and having opportunities to talk to those regulators, but we create that brave space together. It's not people at this space are just going to, it's us coming together collectively for that. And then centering our voices with lived experiences. You can't get away from having voices of people with lived experiences. Otherwise, we just continue to theorize on things that's happening and not really have this is the experience in the room. I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of administrative agencies, both state and national and local. And when I'm speaking, I can share stories of people. And I appreciate the opportunity to bring people in the room. But the most powerful thing is having a voice of somebody that has firsthand experience in the room. That's how change happens because everybody's theorizing. And then when somebody has this lived experience and they walk in a room and they share their story, people connect all the things. And then you have regulators that are like, dang, I know this is my position, but then it starts to change. I will keep that there, but the last thing I'll say is um just to end and encompass this whole slide, that sustained momentum is through the ongoing learning and teaching and mutual support process. It is the mutual support process. It's supporting those new voices. It's like learning from older voices. It's the collective. Next slide, please. So I I want to hold that again. This space is a space where leaders are uplifted, and so I've already touched on bringing real stories. Can't get away from that. And then just for people in the change making process, it's so easy to feel like you're being tokenized or, hey, my story is just getting, you know, in the change process in community with community coalitions and groups. It's not about being tokenized, but about your presence and demanding to be heard, investing in long-term process of relationships and working on an issue. And then again, we talked about that teaching and learning process with the next generation. Next slide, please. Here's some principles. I think we've talked about principles, but the one thing that I'll say is the collaboration across differences. Um, and this being the first part of two sessions, talking more about differences in the next session, but the collaboration of across differences allows for new opportunities. Next slide. Okay, this is the part we all get to work together. So we're gonna take a minute and I'm gonna ask you guys to write one sentence message that you want decision makers to remember after hearing you speak. So it could be we're going to this regulatory conference and our energy bills are going up. What do you want them to understand? Or it could be people are losing their houses because of inequities in the system and their taxes are getting astronomically higher, and that's totally unjust. Let's take 1 minute. I'm gonna put my timer on for us to embody this message, and then I'm hoping that we can share it to close us out.
Is one that I often hope to leave decision makers with is just really putting themselves in the shoes of the people who are advocating. And as you noted, understanding their lived experience and then asking themselves what they would want them to do if they were in the other person's shoes, and not just look at it from their own standpoint of what they can and can't do, but to recognize the needs of the folks that, again, are advocating on behalf of the community.
I put mine in the chat.
Okay. Do you mind if I read it out loud? Okay, wonderful. All right. We want you to represent all people of our country and make it possible for people who literally built this country and make it run can live affordably. We hold we hold the energy that powers communities, whether utilities attempt to charge for it or not. Our fuel comes from within. So thank you all. More on this message. We'll talk about messaging in our next part of this series. Grateful for this opportunity to learn alongside you guys. Thank you.